It's been a long time since basketball has been played in the Manley Field House. Today, it's strictly an indoor training facility for Syracuse University athletes. And it isn't even called the Manley Field House anymore. The space is part of the John A. Lally Athletics Complex, a multi-purpose hub for student-athlete life, a welcome state-of-the-art upgrade for the university in the competitive world of college sports. What goes around, comes around. Because when it opened in 1962, they were saying the same thing about the Manley Field House. The dawn of the 1960s was proving to be a nightmare for Coach Mark Gooley. In consecutive seasons, playing before diminishing war memorial crowds, the team finished 4-19 and 2-20, overmatched and undermanned. And the worst was yet to come, a 27-game losing streak. That did it. Gooley resigned before the 62 season was over. It was time for a new coach. Syracuse found their man at Southern Mississippi, where Brooklyn-born Fred Lewis was having great success. Over a 2-year span from 1959 to 1961, his teams had compiled a 46-5 record. His star guard on those teams was future assistant and head Syracuse coach Roy Danforth.
I said, I can do with the freshman team as I please. I said, you cannot interfere with me coaching the freshmen. And he agreed to that. Hell, if I'd have been him, I would have never agreed to that.
At Syracuse, Lewis would be playing his home games in a new arena. Construction of the Manley Field House was well underway. Increased revenue from the football bowl games put the university's fund drive over the top. The structure was planned as an indoor practice facility for football, ROTC drills, and basketball. One of Lewis's first stops on the recruiting trail was Springhorn High School in Washington, D.C. Reeling in their smooth playmaking guard Dave Bing wasn't going to be easy. The talented youth already had 200 scholarship offers.
Dave Bing had the total game.
Mel Besden was the director of Camp Walden, where every summer Dolph Shays had his all-star basketball camp, where Dolph's Syracuse national teammates would often come and scrimmage the kids. Just a few weeks before freshman year, Coach Lewis took his young phenom to the camp. Bing was pitted against guards Hal Greer and Larry Costello.
They're playing and he's going wild. He's making everything, and I see Larry and Dave and Hal Greer switching. You know, you better take him. I can't take him.
I remember seeing Dave Bing on campus with Coach Fred Lewis, and Fred Lewis would call Dave Bing Duke.
He controlled the boards. He was a great rebounder, and he was a great passer and a great defender. He had the total game. He did everything to make you win.
Dave Bing was the man on campus. He was Syracuse's greatest basketball player.
Greatness never fades. Lewis's first recruiting class came ready to play, continually shredding the varsity in scrimmages, and their entertaining preliminary games were frequently a better attraction than their upperclassmen. Joining the party sophomore year was 6'9" West Point transfer Chuck Richards. Teaming with Bing, the inside-outside duo carried Syracuse to the NIT just 2 years after 2-20. The fiery Lewis had the team on the rise.
Fred Lewis was the greatest on-court coach that I'd ever seen. He can make on-court adjustments easier and better than anybody I'd ever seen.
The 63-64 basketball yearbook made mention of some walk-on named Boeheim, who they claimed was a sleeper, but not for long.
Boeheim was one of the smartest players I ever remember. He knew where to be to get an outlet pass, and he knew where to be all the time. That's why he became such a great coach. He knows basketball.
Lewis's teams played a very aggressive zone defense.
I give Fred all the credit for the Syracuse's 2-3 defense. I think Fred started that.
Bing's stylish play infused the program with energy, talent, and winning. The winning began drawing fans into the cozy and sometimes quirky confines of the Manley Field House.
The crowd was right on top of the court. The court was, I don't know if you realize this, was elevated 3 feet off the floor. So you walked up to it, and now everything's on top of you.
The raised floor was a great floor to play on. It was really, it had a lot of give to it.
Beneath the raised floor was a dirt field that the football team practiced on.
As far as the dirt goes, opponents would tell me after the fact that the toughest thing about playing in Manley was not the Manley Zoo. It was the fact that after halftime they couldn't breathe because of all the dust in the air.
The color of what you would see if you were playing was like kind of a yellowish kind of haze that would fall over the floor.
The throats would get all dry, and it was amazing. That never thought of it because we practiced when the football team was practicing. There was dust always in there, so it never made it one bit of difference to any of us, I don't think.
The lighting was wonderful. It just hit you like a burst of sun. You'd walk in, and it was more than electric. It was almost intoxicating, I would say. But when those stands were filled, and they were filled most of the time, it felt like a family. You were like a member of the family. And everybody looked down on the court. There were no bad seats.
You can look it up. Lewis loved to play the transition game. Lots of running and lots of gunning. His 65-66 team scored at a breakneck pace, and without benefit of a three-point shot, lighting up triple figures 14 times, averaging 99 points a game, paced by Bing's 28.4 a game average.
And you know what people never realize, and probably still don't? Bing only had one eye, and didn't bother his playing at all. We had size, we had quickness, we had shooters, we played good defense.
Roy Danforth has fond memories of the guys he coached.
George Hicker could shoot you in a game, and he could shoot you out of game.
And one day, George's father called with a request.
He said, "Would you tell George to get a haircut?" I said, "Hell, Troop." I said, "He's your son. You tell him." He said, "But he wouldn't do it if I tell him." He said, "You tell him, he'll do it."
Vaughn Harper often hosted potential recruits.
So Vaughn would say, "Coach, how bad do we want him?" I said, I don't know what the hell that affects Vaughn's recruiting, I guess. But Vaughn was a great guy.
Prospect Richie Cornwall wanted to follow his brother to Tennessee.
I said, "Richie, you want to go to Tennessee and shoot the ball 3 times, or you want to come to Syracuse and shoot it whenever you want?" In Tennessee, the whole damn team didn't shoot the ball the 15 times.
Big Rick Dean was tough in the paint and thought he was tough enough to play football, too.
The first day out there, Zonka came over the line and hit Dean, knocked the hell out of him. Rick came in the office the next day and said, "Coach," he said, "you were right. I don't want to play football."
In 1966, the high-scoring Orangemen advanced to the NCAA's Sweet 16, where they were defeated by Duke. Bing finished the year the nation's 5th leading scorer, a consensus first-team All-American, and went on to a Hall of Fame NBA career. 2 years later, Fred Lewis departed, and the Roy Danforth era began.
So he left Syracuse to go to Sacramento State and become an AD.
With assistant coach Jim Boeheim by his side, Danforth would lead the team for the next 8 years.
I think after Dave Bing left in that group, there was a lull for 3 or 4 years.
Big Bill Smith was 7 feet tall, yet his teams were under 500. But all that changed in 1970. That's when Mike Lee and Mark Waddick arrived. The lull and the losing was over, and the Royce Runts era officially began.
that's when they were calling us Roy's Runts, but we really weren't runts. I mean, someone made that up. We didn't really appreciate the title, I can tell you that. I know I didn't, and maybe that was a motivator for us even more.
Mike Lee is the best 6'3" white forward in the country. And he was. During the game, down at the tough end of the game, if we needed 2 points, I'd call a timeout and I said, look, we're going to go inside to Mike Lee. I said, Mike, you do your thing. And he'd do it. He was a player.
Mike, for his size, was tough. I mean, he was tough. He was a rebounder, a scrapper. He played against guys a lot bigger than him, and it didn't matter.
Played hard and got in the habit over years. You got to get the ball somehow. You know.
Mark Waddick excelled at baseball, track, basketball, and football at Bishop Ludden Junior and Senior High School in Syracuse. In fact, he was originally attending Syracuse on a football scholarship.
And he came into my office and said, Coach, he said, you got to talk to Coach Schwarzwalder. He said, I don't want to play no more football. He said, I want to play basketball.
And play he did. Mark Waddick was 6'1", but played like 7'1". A tenacious rebounder, he brought football physicality to the hardwood.
Bobby Dooms and Mark Waddick didn't really get a lot of credit sometimes. They were tough players, good team players, both of them. They did what they were supposed to, didn't take any crap from anybody.
Dooms was center Bobby Dooms.
Our biggest player was Bobby Dooms. The big center was about 6'5", and he was the only big guy we had.
Roy's Runts were short on height, but long on hustle. A spirit inspired by Coach Roy Danforth.
He took a team and teams that didn't have a lot of size, but had a lot of energy and had a lot of gumption, a lot of moxie. We pressed the whole game, usually, a lot of times because we're smaller than most teams, but nobody really ran over us. But we could compete.
One of Danforth's earliest recruits was Greg Kid Coles, who never saw a shot he didn't like.
Greg Coles was a senior when I was a sophomore. We played in the backcourt together for that year. We were the highest scoring backcourt in the country at that time. Most people don't know that, but that's a fact. Greg could shoot it. If we had the three-point line back then, Greg would have ate it up. He was a prolific shooter, and he could get his shot off on his own. He didn't need a lot of help. Sometimes I couldn't believe the shots that he took.
January 1971, Syracuse at St. John's was going down to the wire when Danforth called on the kid.
I said, Coles, I said, you little son of a bitch, I said, you've been poor-mouthing me all the time, I said, and telling me you're a great player. I want to see how great you are. I said, you win the game for us. And I told everybody else, I said, nobody shoots the ball except Coles. And he won the game.
And then there was the big man, the great man, Rudy Hackett.
Rudy was an intense player. He worked really hard. He developed his body from the time he was a sophomore to he was a senior. He got more muscular, got heavier, but he worked on his game. He wasn't somebody that took, this for granted. He really appreciated the talent that God gave him, and he worked on it pretty hard.
We were roommates from sophomore year on, so we were pretty good friends. But Rudy was, he was a real good team player, and once again, I don't think Rudy's another player that doesn't get the credit he deserves nowadays. I mean, they're putting everybody's jerseys up above. I think his should have been up a long time ago.
My dad put a blacktop basketball court in our backyard and we spent all our time there.
Mike and Jimmy Lee's basketball journey started down Binghamton Way, outside their Kirkwood, New York home.
I used to play one-on-one. I almost had to beat it a number of times, but going for a game point, I'd always end up on the ground and then the ball thrown on my chest. He goes, that's a foul.
The brothers were the stars of the Windsor High School Black Knights, where Mike held all the records until Jimmy broke every one.
Jimmy was probably the best foul shooter I've ever been around. When he got on the foul line, you knew he wasn't going to miss. But he could also shoot, so you got to get him the ball where he can get open and he can shoot it.
Jimmy Lee was the leader of the pack, and he never said a word.
Jimmy Lee was a pure stroker with a catch-and-shoot trigger, and he owes it all to his big brother, Mike.
I think he blocked every shot I ever took, and it gets kind of frustrating, but we'd always play shooting games in the backyard, so I had to somehow learn to get it way up high and quick.
But I don't think bad with Jimmy. He'd get hurt, he wouldn't take a day off, he wouldn't rest or nothing. He just continued to play.
Sweet D, Dennis DuVal played with style, grace, and a hunger to win.
And I knew when I went on that court every night that I could beat everybody, that I wasn't afraid, you know what I mean? It was my challenge, this is what I gotta do. I didn't worry about those things, you know, nor did I worry about how people perceived me. Couldn't, because if you start thinking about those things, you can't compete. I never worry about outcomes, I'm always worried about the process. How am I gonna get this done? How are we gonna get this win?
Back in 1970, Danforth was in hot pursuit of the Westbury Long Island Star, and after a high school all-star game, paid an unusual visit.
So Dennis is in the shower, taking a shower, and I go in the shower, tap him on the shoulder, and he turns around, looks at me, and looks around me, and I could see the expression on his face. He said, "What the hell are you doing in here? I'm taking a shower."
And these other guys on my team are like, you know, who's this guy? You know what I mean? That's how intense of a recruiter he was.
You know, when I became a head coach up there, we had no band to come to the game, no enthusiasm.
Well, Coach got his music and something else. One day before practice, he noticed Dennis DuVal performing Harlem Globetrotter-type ball tricks.
Warm-ups, he'd go behind his back, over his hip, between his legs, and he did a hell of a job at it. He was good.
And he says to me, "You're going to do that before the game."
He'd dribble it between his legs, behind his back, and make a layup. And the place was just going nuts.
You had to get there early if you wanted to sit in the Manley Zoo.
And the students and people were out of control sometimes, which was our advantage.
And they were announcing the players for the other team.
And the first 5 rows behind the other team's bench was called the Kennel Club.
"Who's he?" the students would yell.
Frank Layden from Niagara, he'd have a timeout, he'd put chairs in the court, and the kids would yell, "Chairs off the court, chairs off the court."
And they called it the Kennel Club because the people sat back there would bark at the other coach.
The second player was announced. "Who cares?"
Then they'd get up, and whenever Frank Layden would stand up, the kids would yell, "Sit fat Layden, sit fat Layden."
And the zoo would go, "Big shit."
The guys would just sit there like this. They didn't dare do anything because if you were on the bench, they would pick you out and just torture you.
Eventually, the fans were so abusive that the administration asked Roy to talk to the kids.
Told them I appreciated everything they're doing, but I said, tone it down just a little. And I said, the game that we get 50 points ahead, I'll come down and lead a cheer for you. Not knowing that the next game we were going to be up by 50.
And all of a sudden we had a timeout. I see him at the other end of the court, and he goes by the visitor's bench and is cheering underneath the basket, and then comes back during the timeout. And I'm like, where did he go? You know what I mean? But that just shows you the entertainment side of him.
And boy, did I catch some garbage of that. I had to write a letter to the coach. I had to write a letter to the athletic director and apologize to everybody. But it was worth it.
I lost one home game in 4 years of college.
Home losses were few and far between. Back in the days when Manley was a 4-letter word to the opposition.
I only lost 3 games.
And 2 of those were back-to-back, late in the '75 season. No fun. And worse, when your friends shun you for losing.
Our friends wouldn't even talk to us. From that point on, though, we made a pact. It's like, man, looks like it's just us against the whole campus. So 15 of us got together, They go, let's just play for ourselves. Then we kind of went on a roll.
The team rolled all the way to the Sweet 16, taking on a formidable North Carolina team that featured 3 All-Americans. But Syracuse prevailed when Jimmy Lee swished an 18-footer at the buzzer. A repeat performance of a high school game against Whitney Point.
But the basket at the buzzer was from the exact same spot that my jump shot against Carolina was.
If Jimmy don't call
Once
me
a
Bug
hero,
Williams doesn't get the ball
always a hero. And then it was on to
Rudy
the Elite Eight in a frantic overtime win against Kansas State. With seconds remaining, the human jet, Jimmy Williams, drove the length of the court and found Rudy Hackett for the game-time bucket.
Coach Danforth grabbed us all. He goes, look at him. We have won this game. I go, what do you mean? He goes, turn around and look at our opponents. They are beat. And we did. They were all walking off the court like this because they had the game won, but now it's overtime.
For the first time in history, a Syracuse team had punched their ticket to the Final Four. It had been a magical ride, but in San Diego, the spell was broken. Despite their best efforts, the Orange went down to defeat against a bigger and deeper Kentucky team. For Coach Danforth, though, his guys would always be winners.
We didn't have a lot of rah players. They just knew their job and did the job. I'm just appreciative for the players because they deserve everything.
Being a great teammate doesn't mean that everybody gets along. What it means that you do what you have to do so everyone could succeed. And that's the type of team we had back then. It wasn't a team that had a lot of selfishness in it and worried about individual stats and those that we played as a team. Because if we didn't, we wouldn't win. And we knew that. And that was one thing that Coach Danforth instilled in us, along with Coach Boeheim, who was assistant at the time.
I thought I did a good job associating and filling in with the fans. I just thought I was like one of them. I just hope that they remembered me as being a truthful guy and a good coach, and reliable and dependable and a happy guy. I was always a happy guy.